Now look, it's pretty clear the Imperials weren't meant to be the good guys in Star Wars. The empire they served was a genocidal war machine responsible for untold numbers of atrocity over the course of the mere 23 years it had control of the galaxy for. But did the empire do anything good? Were there ways in which it was an improvement over the Republic? In this video, we're going to be taking a look at a handful of things the empire did right, and also at some of the things that looked good on the surface, but weren't.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
First and foremost, we'd like to strongly emphasize that we are not defending the Empire. Even if it did some good things, those things do not outweigh the atrocities it was responsible for. Making the trains run on time doesn't in any way make up for genocide. We shouldn't really have to say this, but evil acts are evil, and it's good form not to romanticize them. After all, while the Empire may be fictional, it does represent very real concepts that have been responsible for very real atrocities. But as for the question of this video, was there anything the Empire did well? As a matter of fact, yes. It certainly did a better job of organizing itself than the Republic did, at least, even if its goals were abominable. It didn't quite live up to its promise of eliminating the inefficiencies of the old order though. Even if the tremendous corruption and gridlock of the Senate were eliminated under Imperial rule, it was replaced by more corruption, deadly ambition, and staggering incompetence in the military, especially in the Admiralty and governorships. There's also something to be said for Imperial logistics. The Empire did indeed make the trains run on time, and furthermore, it overhauled the Republic's system of sectors. Previously, the largest jurisdictions in the Republic had been just over 1,000 sectors, which served as the basis for Senate representation. This ended up causing a lot of organizational problems, which resulted in the Empire turning the military sectors established during the Clone Wars into permanent oversectors, of which there were 20 in total, at least at first. This made logistics much easier, and if the Empire cared about the rim worlds, the oversector system could have worked wonders to keep them supplied. Over time, however, the borders of the oversectors changed to reflect different needs. By the time of the Galactic Civil War, for example, the entire Outer Rim was a part of Oversector Outer, which was much less useful for non-military logistics. There is one singular category in which we can say the Empire was better than the Republic without any clarifications, however. The Empire treated their clones far better, probably out of fear. Once the reconquest of the Rim was over, clones were allowed to retire comfortably. Those who did were treated rather well, better in fact than virtually every non-human in the galaxy, which was in sharp contrast to the outright slavery they endured under the Republic. Those who didn't retire were still treated much better, as they were pretty much the only competent ones left in the Imperial military and were plenty useful as a result. A major problem the Republic just kind of ignored when adopting the clone army was what they would do with the clones once the war was over. As the Clone Wars took off and the Republic started to implode, the foresight of most loyalists rarely extended to the next week, never mind to the end of the war. The Senate quickly adopted a policy of hanging on for dear life and just letting Palpatine do everything, not questioning a single word of his proclamations, constitutional amendments, and proposed laws. Nobody was planning for the end of the war except Palpatine, and for obvious reasons, his plans weren't public knowledge. Meanwhile, the Republic treated its clones like droids. They weren't paid, they weren't given all that many breaks, and they weren't allowed to have lives outside of their military duties. They were slaves, and while most of the Republic seemingly didn't care for some unfathomable reason, that didn't stop many of the clones themselves from resenting their situation. Some, like Sergeant Slick, even jumped ship over it. Many others begrudgingly accepted it for the sake of war, but would have been pretty damn angry if things didn't change after the Clone Wars were over. Now, things kept going the same way for a little bit after the declaration of a new order, as the Empire was still at war for the first few years of its existence. For most clones, the Clone Wars only ended in 17 BBY when the reconquest of the Rim finally came to a close. But after that, they finally began to see change. Clone stormtroopers were finally allowed to live a little, even if they remained in the military. Many were even tasked with training new stormtroopers. These changes led clones to develop overwhelmingly positive views of the new order for the most part, and some clone stormtroopers even considered their service during the dark times to have been the high point of their lives. Furthermore, as we've said earlier, the Empire allowed clones to retire. A good many clones didn't actually take this option, as improvements to military life convinced many to stay on. As a result, the civilian galaxy wasn't flooding with retiring clones, even if a large number of retirees did enter civilian life at once. They were apparently given decent enough retirement packages for them to not have crushed the job market by retiring, and as far as we know, they weren't really discriminated against much, if at all. More likely than not, the brutality clone stormtroopers expressed during the reconquest of the Rim terrified the civilian galaxy into letting the clones just go about their lives. The Empire also did a pretty solid job of cracking down on piracy. One of the biggest problems that plagued the Republic was pirate gangs, which ran rampant across the Outer Rim. The Republic did an incredibly poor job of stopping them, and things got so bad that it took the Trade Federation and their Trade Defense Force to actually start to solve the issue. The Republic left many RimWorlds so desperate, they essentially sold themselves to the mega corporations for protection from endless pirate raids. Imperial rule saw a massive crackdown on piracy on the Rim, and in some regions, this won the Empire the support of the locals. Space lanes in the Rim were, in general, much improved by Imperial rule, as outlaws were cleared out and shipping was allowed to continue largely unabated. The Empire also did a lot of work exploring the fringes of known space and developing outlying sectors, both of which had been largely neglected under the Republic. But the campaign against piracy was often used as a pretext for Imperial military leaders to do more nefarious things. Pirate became synonymous with rebel and separatist, and Imperial governors used the excuse of fighting pirates to violate the rights and liberties of millions of beings, often for illegitimate reasons. Furthermore, the scourge of piracy was really just supplanted by the scourge of imperial corruption, as governors assembled sizable personal fortunes through taxes and seizure of possessions of so-called pirates. However, many of the positives often touted as reasons to support the Empire weren't really all that positive. For example, the core worlds prospered under Imperial rule. Some of this was a legitimate improvement. The Empire improved logistics, as we mentioned earlier, and the core benefited the most from this by far. More efficient governing in the region meant that quality of life largely improved under the Empire and the core, especially in comparison to how it was during the war. The core became wealthier under the Empire as well, but this wasn't necessarily a good thing. While it's nice enough for the core worlds that they got richer under the Empire, it wasn't so nice for the people the Empire squeezed that wealth out of. Planets as coreward of Mimban were enslaved and strip mined for every last bit of natural resources the Empire could get, and it was this ecological devastation that was responsible for the wealth of the core. At the end of the day, more beings were hurt than helped by increased core world prosperity. Granted, this wasn't exclusive to the Empire. The history of the Republic was quite consistent in that the core worlds were always exploiting the rim worlds, stripping whole regions of natural resources to increase their wealth. This only really started to change under the New Republic, and even then it never completely stopped. But the Empire still made things a lot worse in that regard. Unlike the Republic, the Empire was direct in its exploitation of the Rim, instead of turning a blind eye to the exploits of individual core worlds. The Empire made plenty of things more efficient, and unfortunately, the oppression of the Rim was one of them. So those were some things the Empire did at least somewhat right. But what do you think? Would you have preferred to live under the Republic or the Empire? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. And just before you go guys, if you want to listen to the music played in this video and a lot of our recent videos, make sure you check out the top of the description. We have the link to the playlist there. And if you just want to join the wider Geetsly's community, make sure you check us out on our main Discord where you can chat to myself and other Star Wars fans, and the Geetsly's Gaming Network where you can play games with other Star Wars fans. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.